their God is perfect, and they know that they know that they know everything they believe with absolute certainty, and therefore any evidence that contradicts any of it has to be wrong. But if you just mean believing something to a high degree of certainty based on the weight of the evidence, allowing for the chance that your knowledge could be incorrect, which is the way I'd use the word because I'm humble enough to accept my own limitations, then it allows knowledge just fine.
It's not only a threat to belief in spirits, it's also a threat to belief in science.
You spent all this time explaining why pure reason is not a reliable means to obtain true information, and now you're saying that that's a threat to science? No, pure reason is not science. How many times do I have to say this? In fact, the entire point of science is the rejection of the idea that pure reason can be reliably used like that. The obvious flaws in human reasoning are exactly why infallibility and the divine perfection of human cognition are not assumed as part of the scientific method. It's why the main point of the scientific method is to track down flaws, not to declare absolute truth. If you assume you're absolutely right all the time, then you're vastly more likely to be wrong in the future because your ideas are inflexible, and you'll need to ignore future evidence rather than changing to accommodate it. But if you want to go deeper than that into the philosophy of science, then you could say that the empiricism behind science required reason alone to build it up as a concept, yes. And I would agree, which is why science, like all concepts, has to remain open to criticism, revision, and even potentially replacement. Of course, since science has been so incredibly productive as a process, I doubt that's going to happen anytime soon. The proof is in the pudding, as they say, but it's possible. Of course, this threat to science, if you really want to call it that, because honestly I'd consider it much more of a threat to religion that's never produced anything practical rather than science that constantly produces practical things, this threat is not naturalism. Naturalism has nothing to do with it. The actual threat you're talking about is skepticism. Skepticism is, in a sense, a threat to every belief there is, because true skepticism involves doubting and questioning every single belief and every single pattern of reasoning there is. Personally, I like that. I want everything anyone thinks to be subject to constant scrutiny, including everything I think. I want to wake up in the morning and immediately start interrogating my deepest principles and beliefs for any inconsistencies or insufficiencies I can find, and I do that. Because I believe the words of Epictetus, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows.
And I have to ask, since you naturalists tell me there's no afterlife, what happens when you commit intellectual suicide?
No, Dave. Intellectual suicide is not admitting you can be wrong. Intellectual suicide is assuming you're right and then refusing to ever correct yourself again as a result, thereby willfully making yourself far more likely to be wrong. When you do this, your intellect doesn't even enter into the picture. Your position isn't based on intellect, much less intellectual honesty. Your position is only based in that extreme kind of arrogance rarely seen in anyone except the religious. Okay, so you basically repeat yourself for the next couple minutes, so I'll skip that bit and get to the point.
This sort of blind faith in naturalism completely undermines any confidence in our human reasoning ability and therefore undermines any confidence in what reason produces, namely our beliefs, including our belief in naturalism.
Again, naturalism has nothing to do with that. You seem to have trouble distinguishing between distinct concepts. That's a pet peeve of mine. No, what undermines our confidence in our reasoning is the fact that our reasoning has been constantly demonstrated to be imperfect. Just the mere fact that people reach different conclusions based on the same information should be enough to demonstrate that, but it of course goes much further than that. Naturalism or no naturalism, our reasoning cannot be absolutely trusted. Not yours, not mine, not anyone's. And therefore, yes, we should avoid having total confidence in our beliefs because we can be wrong. You could be wrong about God, Dave. I know you don't want to believe it, but you can. Committed naturalists could be wrong about naturalism. So we need to start from the evidence and go from there. It's all we can do. And the evidence so far is this. Nature seems to exist. Full stop. When it comes to ultimate reality, that's really the best we got right now. And so if we want to explain ultimate reality, we're going to have to start there. There's no God there. Nor is there an assertion that no God can be there. There's no assertion that the answer has to be naturalistic and there can be no supernatural explanation. Nobody's saying that. But we don't assume supernatural causation when all that's been demonstrated so far is natural causation. I don't understand why this has to be explained so often because it's really not that complicated. The idea of using the fewest assumptions possible to explain the evidence is important because that's how you make sure your theory fits to reality as tightly as possible. If you walk into a room and you find a guy lying in a puddle of blood with a bullet hole in his head and no gun around, you have every right to assume that aliens created a fake body using alien magic and planted planted it in the room so they could observe the reactions of the humans. It's a possibility, but I would propose you might be better off cutting out that unnecessary assumption and starting off by supposing, based on your current knowledge of how past shootings have occurred and your lack of evidence for highly unusual circumstances, that a human shot him. Sure, it could be aliens, yes. The possibility can remain open, but why start with that assumption? So when we're presented with something new to explain, we start investigating it based on what we have evidence for right now and experience with right now, instead of trying to reason our way to belief in something we haven't even demonstrated yet. Like God. You know, man, if you tightened it up a little bit, you could use this video as an advertisement for skepticism. Oddly though, even though you're arguing in skepticism's favor, you seem a little bit down on it. I wonder why that is.
So, if we take naturalism seriously, we can't take naturalism seriously.
I don't know why you think that if you're humble enough to not be absolutely certain of your positions, then you can't even take those positions seriously. You realize you can take an idea seriously without even believing it at all, right? Let alone being absolutely certain of it.
Behold the incredible self-destructing worldview.
Yeah, says the Christian whose video against naturalism convincingly argues for naturalism and the skepticism of religious claims.
There is an alternative, however. Christians believe we're created in the image of God with the ability to learn about everything up to and including our Creator. Does this give us a basis for trusting our reasoning ability? Absolutely.
No, it doesn't give you any more basis for trusting your reasoning than any other flawed human has. It just makes you think it does. It turns you into an arrogant fool who thinks he's definitely right and there's no chance he can be wrong. God exists because I reason he exists, and that reason's definitely correct because God exists. Yeah, you believe you're correct because you believe you're correct. I get it. So if you disagree with me and don't believe what I believe, obviously you're wrong, even if you use the logic and science humans have developed from the ground up based on observation of how reality works and tested over generations. Those just don't compare to my God. It doesn't matter if mere humans say my reasoning contains logical fallacies. God says my reasoning is correct, and therefore it is. Dave, your reasoning's totally circular. It tells you absolutely nothing about whether you're right. This bridge will hold a car because I think it will hold a car, and I'm definitely right because the bridge will hold a car. Yeah, good luck with that, man. I'll enjoy seeing your collapsing bridge on the news. Look, I thought your religion was supposed to be all about humility. So why have you allowed yourself to become so arrogant based on so little? But then again, Christianity also denigrates doubt. Refusing to doubt your own beliefs isn't very humble at all. There's yet another contradiction in Christianity that I don't hear talked about very often. Or maybe it's not arrogance that's driving you. Maybe you just lack the confidence in your own intelligence to admit that you might not be the perfect thinker. Now, me, I don't require that assumption because I'm perfectly content to have only my good ideas hold up under scrutiny and drop my bad ones like the garbage they are and get better ones. I've done it tons of times because I'm much humbler than you are.
Think you're really righteous? Think you're pure in heart? Well, I know I'm a million times as humble as thou art.
You know, I gotta say, this entire video sounds like an expression of the typical religious fear of doubt. The abject terror in the face of uncertainty. Dave, if you ever escape the religious mentality, you'll find that it's really not that bad to not be a cocky religious dude bragging about his superpower of being totally reasonable, even while simultaneously not giving a flying fuck about logical fallacies or even about holding internally consistent positions. Ignorance of your own ignorance might seem like bliss right now, but there really are better ways to live. The weirdest thing about all of this, though, is I didn't think Christians believed that humans are perfect beings at all. As a matter of fact, I thought it was decidedly the opposite. We're fallen beings in need of redemption and our reasoning is flawed and pitiful compared to God's. But what, we're still perfect thinkers? You adhere to a very unusual kind of Christianity, it seems to me.
Our cognitive faculties aren't simply the product of natural selection acting on random mutation, and they serve a greater purpose than finding food. In other words, our ability to reason about ourselves and the world and God makes perfect sense on my worldview, but it makes no sense on naturalism.
Therefore God exists. No, Dave, it makes no sense at all on your worldview. Try harder. And don't come back at me with this shit about, but you're a naturalist, how can you reason that I'm wrong? Just in case you or one of your fans comes back with that. You haven't said naturalists are less capable of reasoning. You've said human reasoning is trustworthy, and therefore God exists. So according to that, naturalists' reasoning is trustworthy as well. So fine, if my reasoning is trustworthy, then you'd better trust this reasoning unless you want to destroy your own premise. Your worldview is based on circular reasoning, and it's riddled with logical fallacies and contradictions both with itself and with reality, so nothing makes sense based on it, and the only thing it's good for is to give people like me something to kill time laughing at.
We can continue arguing about the existence of God all day long, Ben, but a little reflection shows that in arguing about anything, we've already come down on the side of theism.
Dave, if we have to argue about anything, then we two humans have reasoned about the same thing in two different and contradictory ways and reached different conclusions. And thus, human reasoning is not trustworthy. And claim trustworthy human reasoning is to be expected under theism, and since the fact that we're arguing demonstrates that human reasoning is not trustworthy, then theism is disproven by your own criteria. Your argument killed itself. Well done.
Of course, you naturalists are free to suppress the truth. You can continue pretending that your worldview allows things like logical laws or objective moral values or...
Objective moral values. That doesn't even make sense as a sequence of words. It's an oxymoron. Values are subjective by definition. That's the whole point of the word. They're preferences. Some people want to live in a society where people don't kill each other rather than a crime-ridden hellhole. Other people just want total chaos where everyone battles each other for survival. Yeah, both values objectively exist as part of a brain's configuration, but that's not what you're trying to say. And neither one of those values is objectively correct because correct and incorrect don't apply to taste. Taste just is. People might feel very strongly that their values are superior because the effect they believe those values will have if they're implemented will be better for human beings, or the society, or their gods, than all other values. And the order in which they prioritize those is also a subjective value. But that doesn't change the definition of the word values and make these values correct or incorrect in and of themselves. If one of your values is that all humans should be destroyed, other people will disapprove and they'll deem your values harmful or inferior based on their own values, which are not objectively correct or incorrect, not because the universe gives a shit, but because they give a shit. But their condemnation doesn't make you factually wrong. The closest you can get is to determine whether someone's values are compatible with someone else's values, and whether that someone else is a human or a god is totally irrelevant. Your values don't become objectively correct just because they match the subjective preferences of another human being or a god, because that would require a change to the definition of the word values. And if you do that, you're not talking about values anymore, you're talking about something else. However, you can objectively test if actions and policies will help society to align with the subjective values of an individual. So for example, some of my values are people should not kill each other and people should be free to do as they wish. But there's some degree of conflict between those values, so what we're going to have to do is try to reason our way to a balance point between them and then actually test it to see how well it works. And once we've seen some results, we'll have to adjust and refine as necessary or start again from scratch. And that's why the laws of different countries are constantly changing and evolving. People have different ideas about what will help to achieve the society that they want. And generally, you can tell if what you've implemented has actually helped to achieve the kind of society that you wanted. I mean, if you try to implement policies for the good of the people and you end up with Stalinist Russia, I mean, the results are pretty clear, objectively. So, if you and I can agree that we both subjectively value a society in which people don't kill each other, in your case, because you think God wants that, and in my case, because I would rather live in a peaceful country rather than, say, 2016 Syria, then we can work together to figure out how we can set things up to objectively decrease the murder rate. Or to make a long story short, values equals subjective, how well results align with those values equals objective. You understand what equals means, right? It's based on a logical law we were able to intuit because we have to understand the concept of similarity to survive. By the way, slight tangent, I'm not sure if I've ever addressed this before since I normally only address topics that come up in the videos I respond to, but I'd like to speak to it briefly because I think it's important, and also it could be brought up as an objection to what I just said. So there's this common objection from the religious that if you weren't created by God, then sure, okay, maybe it makes sense that you care about making a better world right now since you have to live in it, but why would you care about also maintaining the world for the future after you're dead? And the answer is very simple. Humans are tribal. The reason we care about our descendants is blindingly obvious. That's the whole point of reproducing. So already we have an incentive right there. But that tribal thinking can easily extend to future people who aren't our descendants as well. The world's not like it used to be. It's much easier now to have a global perspective, to think of humanity as one unified group. The way I think about it, usually, and not always, I have different scopes that I think about humanity within, different segments of humanity, but usually, it's our species against the universe, so let's help our group excel. But obviously not everyone thinks like that. Not everyone does care about future people, and so they're willing to take actions now that could destroy the environment over time. To some extent, most of us care a little bit less about future people, and so we don't really think about the passive elements of our lifestyle that could be harmful in the future. That's natural too. The more distant the people are, generally the less you care about them. Which is also why a lot of people don't really care about people in other countries, or they don't care about people outside their city, or they only care about their family and everyone else can go fuck themselves. But all of this comes from the very natural tribalism that's been both such a useful tool and such a danger. Okay, moving on.
Reliable cognitive faculties. You can keep borrowing beliefs and concepts from my worldview that your own worldview just can't support.
I don't have much else to say, man. You just argued for naturalism, argued for the skepticism of everything, including religion, and killed theism, all in one video. You made a more compelling case than I ever could have for why atheism is a good choice, and even for why it's not a good idea to believe in the supernatural, regardless of whether you would assert that the natural is all there is or not. You've demonstrated your profound arrogance and your inability to detect even the most basic problems with your own thought process, and you've shown that this is because you're blinded by your circular reasoning and your feeling that you must be right and everyone else must be wrong, even though, based on your own argument, nobody should be wrong. I don't think I've ever seen anyone argue against their own worldview as convincingly as you did here. I'm glad to have an ally in you, Dave. We atheists thank you for your service.
You can even go on using your mutant berry finding ability to convince yourselves that the natural world is all that exists.
Will do, until you can demonstrate that I can also find supernatural berries.
But if you really buy that, I've got a lovely bridge I'd like to sell you.
No thanks, I only buy supernatural bridges. Let me know when you reason one of those into existence and I'll buy that. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment, tell me what you thought. If you liked this video, be sure to